Hi class, today we're going to be going into chapter 19, talking about populations and how we measure populations and just some characteristics about them in general. So to start, we have a definition of a population, which we had last chapter, but you can put it in here again. It's a group of organisms of the same species living in the same place at one time. Thomas Malthus was alive 1766 to 1834, and he studied populations and the sizes of populations, how they grow, how they reach kind of what he called a carrying capacity. And so he wrote this essay on principle of population. You don't necessarily have to know that for me or anything. But in nature, plants and animals produce more offspring than can actually survive. And the goal of that, or what he believes the goal of that is that populations in general need to survive. So if you produce more than can actually live, then you'll have enough that actually do survive through changing environments and changes around them. He also said that man is capable of overproducing if left unchecked, and those consequences would be famine and poverty due to overpopulation of humans. So he gave three characteristics of a population. First is the size, and then density, and then how they're dispersed. So I'll go through each of those. Population size is the number of individuals in a given area. This is hard to measure, especially with organisms when you're out in the wild. If you're watching a group of squirrels and you're trying to count them, it's not like you have tagged each one or you tell them, hey, stop, and you count them. So it's a difficult thing to measure, and usually we do estimates for this. Even in the census, we do that every 10 years. Those are estimates for population size for an area. Population density is how crowded a population is, and this is the number of individuals per unit area. So an example here would be 30 people in a classroom, or 120,000 people in the city of Green, or whatever it might be. So you're looking at the number of individuals that live in a specific area. And then dispersion is how individuals are spaced. So number one is clumped, and you can see here kind of what that would look like. Now, some reasons that individuals might be clumped is because of safety. Maybe also, safety in numbers. So like a school of fish would be an example that it's safer for them to come in a group. They look larger. Maybe they're not going to have predators coming after them as much as they would if they were by themselves. Number two is even, so that's our second picture here, and there's an even distribution from one individual to the next. And so an example might be a lion that has got its pride land, its area that it's kind of protecting, its territorial. Another example might be birds that have kind of their territory when they lay their eggs, and then they have another group that might do the same thing, or another individual that might do the same thing in another area. Random is more like seed dispersion, so seeds are just carried by the wind, by animals, and wherever they're carried and land, that's where they end up. So that's a random distribution. Okay, population dynamics. Go through this next part in your notes packet. Populations will change over time due to the following: birth rates, death rates, life expectancy, and age structure, and then patterns of mortality. So we're going to go through, you'll be doing a lab in class with age structure and patterns of mortality. If we talk about those first couple, birth rates, how many individuals are born in a particular time period. Death rates, same, how many deaths are there in a particular time period. The life expectancy, how long do these individuals in the population survive? And then age structure is how many individuals do you have that are at each age bracket? Like let's say 0 to 9, 10 to 19, 20 to 29. How many individuals are at each of those age structure or age brackets? Patterns of mortality is how individuals survive. Are they born and they struggle to survive, and then once they make it to a certain age, they have a long lifespan? Or is it that when they're born, they have a great chance of survival and they live to be very old. And I'll show you a couple of these in our survivorship curves. So here's an age structure example. Distribution of individuals among different ages in a population. So you can see in this first one, rapid growth is Nigeria because there's a lot of young people, very few old people. United States has slow growth. It's fairly even as you go up in the ages. And then decline in growth is Germany because the number of people at the younger ages is pretty slim. It's pretty low. Survivorship curves, we have type 1, type 2, and type 3. So type 1 is when, and you'll need to write this in, type 1 is when you're born, you have a really good chance of survival, and you survive to old age. So you can see in this example here, we have the humans as an example. Elephants are also an example. So the individual here is born. They have a great chance of survival. They make it to old age. Type 2, birds are an example, and with type 2, doesn't matter how old the individual is, their chance of survival or their death rate chance is the same throughout life. So it's not like when they're young, they're easy to pick off or anything like that. They just have the same chance of survival no matter how old they are. And then type 3, these individuals or these populations have a low chance of survival when they're first born. So an example here is a seed. Also, another example would be sea turtles. So when they're first born, they're out in the beach, very exposed to the elements and to people, to predators, and they have to make it all the way out to the ocean. And not only do they have to make it past the surf, but they have to make it to the deep ocean where they have a better chance of survival. And so from any of that point, from the time they hatch to the time they make it out to that deeper water, they have a chance of being eaten or killed. And so their chance of survival is really low when they're first born or when they're young. Kind of like this tree here. If you were to see this, you might run over it with the lawnmower. And so it doesn't have a really good chance of survival. But once it makes it past kind of a critical age, it has a great chance of surviving to old age. And so once this tree makes it to a point where it's obvious that it's a tree and you don't run over it with the lawnmower, it has a great chance of surviving to really old age. And here's the explanations for those again. Type 1, death at old age. Type 2, death at any age is your chances are the same no matter how old you are. And type 3, death at a young age is very common. Okay, we're going to end there with 19.1.